All right, so welcome to the Hinduism workbook. Of course, make sure you put your name here and remember to use a different font. The workbook, of course, is also a note outline and allows you to have a little bit of information that's not quite in our textbook. So I'm now adding back some of the key images or symbols that you might see associated with Hinduism. So, of course, we have the Om sound. Uh, Now, some of us might be thinking, Om, that's a Buddhist thing. It is, but it actually originates in Hinduism. We have the symbol of the universe, which is the yantra. We have the lotus, which in Hinduism emphasizes beauty. We have the Trishula, which is the trident of Shiva. Really interesting story happens here with one of the goddesses, and you're just going to have to listen to the video to get to that point. All right, we have the swastika in its positive form. If it's flipped the other direction, it is in its negative form. In the positive form, it means good luck. And I say negative, but it's still a powerful symbol in relationship to the goddess Kali. And then the conch shell, possibly one of the older symbols. It was uh, basically blown in order to banish fear and evil spirits. I know these dates, this information is a little bit old, and I just haven't updated yet. But according to the CIA World Fact Book, Hinduism makes up just shy of about 15% of the world population with over 1 billion adherents. All right, so there is a timeline in your textbook and the timeline that is here in your workbook. You are welcome for the first task to choose a date from this timeline or the timeline in the textbook. I want you to tell me more than what, for instance, is on the timeline in the workbook if you are choosing a date from this timeline. And the main part is I want you to tell me about the importance or the impact of the date you choose. How did it shape or reshape religious beliefs, practices, culture, society? How did this date have an impact on the history of the religion? Now, I'm not going to go through all of these dates. If you want to listen to all of the dates, the video from recording the in-class lectures is posted in the recommended area, and you can listen to that. It is not required. There are a few dates I want to go over, though, including this early time period in Hinduism. And so we're talking about oral traditions and stories that may have started about 10,000 years ago. Remember, agricultural revolution is around 8,000 BCE. So these are nomadic groups that are beginning to tell stories. Now remember, what happens with oral traditions, both the benefits and the problems that can happen with memory, and the benefits and the problems that can happen when it has that ease of change as well. So around 4000 BCE, so that's just before that 3000 BCE time period of the large-scale urban civilizations, we see the Indus River Valley civilization and the Harappa culture are thriving. Now, this was only realized within the last 100 years. Previously, they thought that the Harappan and some of the other cultures were just these, nomadic groups, and the Aryans came in and took over and destroyed anything that was of theirs. We've learned that that's not entirely the case. So I'm going to show you a couple maps, and we're going to look. So here's the Harappa group right here, and I know this is kind of small, and I don't provide these maps elsewhere. But essentially, this Indus River Valley civilization is this whole area. And to either side, there's more desert regions. As a note, archaeologists have even found that there are cities and towns that are actually off the coast in this area. So there was large scale civilization. There was trade. All these activities of civilization are taking place. Now, what happens, and by about 1500, and yes, I know that says BC, but we do use BCE. By 1500 BCE, the pathways of the Aryans were more complete. But the migration begins as early as about 2000. Now, where are they coming from? They're coming from somewhere in the west. Most estimates are somewhere around Central Europe. We do know that they are coming from the Caucasus Mountains, and that's a main region from which they're coming from, through and across on both sides of the Caspian Sea. But when we look at gods and goddesses of the Vedas, we can do a comparison and say, are any of these gods and goddesses like the ancient Roman ones, or the ancient Greek ones, or Germanic ones, or Celtic and Norse deities? And we do find there are some archetypical deities. One of them is Proto Shiva, and we'll actually talk a little bit about that. Either I will provide the video or I will share the information from the video of Del Deshant when we get to Christianity. I know that may sound odd. We're going to talk about Hinduism and Proto Shiva then, but you'll see what happens. All right, so the Aryans are coming in. They're going on both sides of the Caspian Sea, down through Persia, or what is referred to here as Plateau of Iran, through the Hindu Kush, and they're spreading on down through India. So just again, the Harappa civilization was massive. So when these groups are coming in through and into the area, what ends up happening, yes, the Aryans do seem to have that domination component, but it's actually a merging of the cultures. And so what happens is, when we see the Vedic period beginning, and the entire time period of the Vedas, we see that some of the deities seem to probably have been deities that were right there in the Indus River Valley civilization in that region. Some of the deities likely came from Aryan traditions, and some that were kind of like merged as these cultures came together. Now, when we get to caste system, we'll talk a little more about this, but the region in that area seemed to have had roughly 3 castes. And the Aryan migration, these groups coming in, also seem to have 3 castes. And so they kind of merged together and developed a slightly more detailed caste system. But we'll come to that later. So we have the Vedic time period. During the Vedic time period, we can say that there is more of this view of polytheism. Many gods and goddesses are being emphasized. And only the Brahmin, only the priests are really developing the religion, emphasizing the rituals, the social obligations, and all the requirements. So 800 to 300 BCE. So this is right during that axial age. And this is when the Upanishads are written, which include ideas of reincarnation and karma and Atman and samsara, all these key terms that are really important, not just for the Brahmins, the priests, but the Upanishads is talking to the people. It's giving the people these key components and ideas. By people, I mean not just the priests, but the nobles, the warriors, some of the mercantile caste as well. Between 500 and 1000, we see a number of great epics written in dedication to Shiva, Vishnu, Devi, and others. 5th century BCE, we do see Buddhism and Jainism being founded. This is right during this time period of the axial age. It's also the time period where the Upanishads are being written. So there's a lot of questions that have come up, and people are seeking deeper meanings and understandings. One of the greatest things that shows up just after this, and it's not just one epic, it is the longer Mahabharata, and it's written from somewhere around 200 BCE to 200 CE. It's the closest thing, if you paid attention to the video, it's about the closest thing that can be considered a Bible. And it tells the story of Krishna and Arjuna. And we'll read more about that as we move through. Between 100 and 500s, Hinduism is spreading across Southeast Asia. We have the completion of the Puranas. We have growth and renewed interest in devotional movements such as puja. Between 686 and 718, we have Shankara, the mystic sage, and one of India's greatest philosophers. Influence comes all the way through to modern Hinduism with ideas, interpretations, and understandings of the Gita, the Upanishads, the concept of Brahman. From the 7th to 11th centuries, really it starts with Shankara, and it grows with movements based on Tantra, based on Bhakti, based on essentially what we would call positive psychology today. It is absolutely the mystical approach, this ability to connect deep within, but also like this divine consciousness without or above. A few more dates in here with the British East India Company being formed. This is important. We'll actually talk a little bit about this when we talk about death, because for the city of Varanasi, which is all about cremation, when the British came and take over, especially with the missionaries that were coming, they tried to shut down the entire city. Ramakrishna, Maharishi, Queen Victoria becoming the Empress of India. All right, so this is an important date, and now that I no longer give the major tests, it's not quite as big of a date. However, it will show up as an extra point question. From September 11th to September 27th of 1893, the World Parliament of Religions took place. It's at the Chicago World Fair. Let's see here, Nikola Tesla, his stuff was being introduced. Plastic water bottles made their debut. A whole bunch of things were happening there. And this World Parliament of Religions was really this huge change in the study of religion, in understanding religion, and how, in a sense, you could say that the Western religions started following some of the rules of the Dialogue Decalogue. But no, seriously though, it was a change of approach. And at this World Fair, Vivekananda comes and speaks about Hinduism. And he's sharing the struggles of some people. He's talking about this as a religion, not as some barbaric thing, which some people had thought that way. And in this process, plus everything that was happening in and throughout India, within about 2 years, he actually founded the Vedanta Society. It promotes Hinduism as a world religion. It helps to understand core concepts and views and understandings of Hinduism. It also was designed to help move towards a form of religious studies where it's known as phenomenology. And it's where we look at the phenomena. We look at the experience before we start making the judgments and the assumptions and say, oh, that's barbaric. It's actually taking that time to learn. All right, 1947, India regains independence, but the partitioning leads to conflicts between Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs. 1948, the death of Gandhi. Like I said, in the main lectures from that were recorded in the classroom, I do go a little bit more in depth on some of these, but because you do have the textbook, and I'm trying to really decrease the amount of time of these videos, we're not going to go much deeper in regards to the history. Your first task is, of course, to choose a date in history and tell me what happens. Tell me, cultural religious impact from the event.